And welcome back once again to How to Survive 2025. I'm Brian Keene.
I'm Dacia M. Arnold.
I am Jim Cobb.
And Jim, you are sitting there looking angry. You have the look on your face that I have when there is drama and nonsense going on in my business. Is there drama and nonsense going on in the prepper world?
There is always drama and nonsense going on in the prepper world online. Um, Today's episode of Nonsense involves a survival tip that's been making the rounds once again, primarily on Facebook, but I have seen it elsewhere. It goes something like this: if you are lost or stranded, you should pull out your cell phone and re record your outgoing voicemail message to state where you are, the date, the time, what your situation is, that you're lost, and to somebody please send help. And this thing is it's gone viral multiple times in the last year or so.
None of
And
that is right.
Well, here's the thing, okay? If you want to change your outgoing message, you need your phone to do two things. Number one, it has to have power. And number two, it has to have a cell signal, right?
Right.
If you have power and if you have a cell signal, call 911. Call friends, call family, call for help. Don't sit there trying to navigate through all these different menus to get your outgoing message to change it and chew up that battery life and the sometimes sketchy cell signal. Use it to do something that actually makes sense.
Exactly.
Call for help.
Exactly. So
And
there you have it, listeners. I felt like I was lost in the jungle today. I finished up my gardening, so it's the last of the tomatoes, last of the peppers, cucumbers, beans, etc. And I'll tell you, when I was done, what I really, really wanted was an ice cold bottle of water. And it was
No, you
great.
didn't.
I
No,
could
you
come to
didn't.
the fridge and I could get one. You know what I'm saying, Dacia. But there have been situations where I didn't have that available. So that is our topic for today. We're going to talk about water in survival situations, and what to do if you lose power, water. If you're maybe lost in the woods, water. Just water everywhere.
But you know who is never without water? Suburban moms and their big dumb cup. I can joke because I carry a big dumb cup everywhere I go.
So last week we talked about food, and a preparedness pantry.
yep,
Obviously, water is the most important part of that pantry. But
it is.
what do you suggest, Jim? Should they just buy a case of bottled water at the supermarket and rotate it, or is there special things they should be storing it in? Or
Well, water's water can be problematic when it comes to storage simply because water is what it is. And by that I mean you can't make it smaller, you can't make it lighter. There's no such thing as dehydrated water, okay? It is what it is. 1 gallon of water is always going to weigh 8.34 pounds, give or take, okay? So storing it in mass quantities can be troublesome, particularly if you're not especially strong or in good shape and able to move, great quantities at once. Now, Dacia, how many days can the average person survive without water?
3 days.
3 days. Now, and that comes from what we call the rule of three, right? The body can survive 3 minutes without oxygen,
Hour.
hours without shelter,
Mhm.
3 days without water, 3 weeks without food.
Mhm.
Okay. Obviously, all of that is very subjective. If I'm sitting in a late spring day and I'm in my backyard. It's, 65, 68 degrees, cloudy. My body's going to require less hydration than if I'm out in Brian's garden harvesting the last of the crops and sweating my bejesus off, right? Everything is subjective. But as a rule of thumb, we say you should have on hand 1 gallon of water per person per day for the length of the emergency. Easy to remember, right? 1 gallon per person per day. Here's where the trouble comes in. I don't know about you, my crystal ball stopped working an awful long time ago. I don't know how many days I'm going to need to have that water. Okay. And realistically, 1 gallon per person per day, it sounds like a lot, but it's not, because that's all the water you're going, potentially, that's all the water you're going to have available to you for drinking,
Mhm.
food prep, for washing up, for doing all that fun stuff. Okay. So nobody has ever come out the other end of a disaster upset that they had too much clean water available to them. Okay. That's just not a thing. More is always better than less. So if we circle back to Brian's question, should we do cases of bottled water? What are the other options? For storage, cases of bottled water are probably the easiest for a lot of people. One case of 24 half-liter bottles comes to a little over 3 gallons of water. So, the, what I tell people is 1 case of water split between two people, that's one day. Two people for one day, 1 case of water. Multiply it out by however many people you're relying, that are going to be relying on it. And don't forget your pets, dogs, cats, whatever you have, they're also going to need to drink that water. So you need to account for their needs as well. Brian, how
Jim,
much do you think the average person is going to be able to lift and move around in terms of number of pounds in a container?
you mean on a continuous basis
Yeah,
or
I mean, like, let's say from the basement to the kitchen.
average person?
Yeah,
Like 40 pounds? Oh, sorry.
I
You
was, I
didn't
was,
call on me.
I,
it's okay.
you know what? I'll say 50.
Okay, okay. So that's how many gallons of water? If it's 8 pounds per gallon, we're talking what, 5, 6 pounds or
I,
five,
I,
six
I
gallons.
I'll take your word for it. I'm a writer, not a mathematician. So
I don't. My college son would be able to answer that better than me, but we're just gonna, you know, go with it. We'll say 5 to 6 gallons. Okay.
6.2.
Thank you. So, do you want to carry 40 to 50 pounds over and over and over up and down your stairs? Probably
no,
not.
no,
But a case of water you can probably handle. You
sure.
know, 25 pounds. Most people can handle that one at a time. Don't stack them more than two or three high. I know in the stores you'll see them stacked to the rafters. If something catastrophic happens in the store, that's not a big deal. If it happens in your basement, it could be a big deal. I don't stack them more than about three high, maybe four. That's about it. Another option, if you don't want to go out and buy water, which I still to this day, my grandparents would have been baffled at the thought of people buying water at the store. They just that they would have lost their minds. Um, Another option is to recycle 2 liter bottles. Like, you go to the store, you buy a 2 liter bottle of soda, drink the soda, wash out the bottle, and use that for water storage. Do not use milk jugs for this purpose.
Why?
I know people do. The problem is the milk jug, the plastic isn't meant for long term storage,
Mm,
and they'll develop little pinholes.
hmm
this happened to my mom, who back in the day. To this, I cannot remember why she was filling up jugs of water and putting them in the basement. She did weird stuff sometimes. And that it wasn't a prepping thing. That's why I'm saying it's weird. I can't remember what her reasoning was. But anyway, after about 6 months, all of a sudden there's water all over the place because they developed these little pinholes. I know people do this. I know they store water, and I know nothing bad ever happens to them. That doesn't mean nothing bad is going to happen to you. Okay. The 2 liter bottles are a higher grade plastic and they'll last longer. Brian and I were talking about this off the air. You need to rotate your water supply about every 6 months. What I do is I use that water to water plants and my animals and that kind of stuff. I don't just dump it down the drain. I take it out to the garden, things like that. The water gets stale more than anything else. You want to keep it as fresh as possible. So about every 6 months, I dump the containers and refill. I actually, about every month, I'm doing this because I rotate through my different supplies. There are some people who will invest in large containers to store water, like 55-gallon drums or larger. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but Dacia, what's 55 times 8.34?
Times 8.34?
Yeah.
Oh,
How
no.
much are we going to weigh?
Come on, you got this.
220?
400 something?
Is it 4? Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
not 25, it's
Yeah.
50.
Yeah.
So, yes,
Yeah.
you're right. 400 something.
So you don't want to put a bunch of these in a bedroom on a second floor. It might not end well for you. If you're going to go that route, keep them in a garage or a basement or someplace where the floor is going to be much more sturdy than, a second floor apartment, that kind of thing. And keep in mind, you have to have a way to access the water. You don't want to just be reaching down in the bottom of it with a cup trying to scoop it out. The best ones come with little spigots, that kind of thing.
You can also install your own little spigots. I've seen a lot of
Oh, yeah.
those, like swiping through Pinterest. People use them for rain collection.
Yep.
And then, I mean, this might segue into our next section, but like they develop like these layers of material that like the rainwater will go through. So that way, when it comes out at the bottom, it's potable or drinkable.
Right.
Otherwise, it's gray water. And what gray water is what you feed to. Do you give it to the dogs? Gray water is what you water the plants with.
Yes. Gray water is good for plants. It's okay. Generally speaking, it's good for hygiene, things like that. Something that, some of our listeners might not know. Your toilet will work without water pressure. Meaning if you turn your taps on and nothing comes out, you can still use that toilet. You just have to manually fill the tank every time, which is where gray water comes in.
So let's say,
go ahead.
Let's say you're collecting rainwater.
Yeah.
Okay, and for whatever reason, you didn't prep, you didn't listen to this podcast. Okay, now the S has hit the fan, and all you've got is a rain barrel. So how do you make that drinkable?
Okay, and Dacia hit on it. It's called filtration. You're going to want to filter the water. Keep in mind that rainwater, as it falls, is okay. There's nothing generally in it. The problem is it will pick up things from whatever it hits. Now, if it's coming off your roof line, what else might be on your roof, do you think?
I've got moss on my roof.
You think any critters have been running around up there?
Oh, likely. Oh, at least, yeah, we're in the woods. There's all kinds of bird poop up there.
Yeah. Do you want to drink that? Probably
I
not.
don't want to drink bird poop now.
No. So we have two different ways that we, two different ways we generally treat suspect water. We have filtration and we have purification. Either of you want to try tackling the difference between the two?
So what purification and filtration. So filtration is more getting sediment out, so getting
Mm-hmm.
larger particles out. But then bacteria and things are still likely to exist in the water. We can't see them, and that needs to be purified, which any kind of filtration, like your sand, your charcoal, things like that, is not going to filter out. But what can filter it out? Boiling. Am I right?
You're getting there. You're getting there.
Distilling.
Yes.
Yes.
Boiling, distilling. There are filters that will handle bacteria, protozoa, viruses, heavy metals, that kind of stuff. The difference is you're not going to find those next to the Brita water pitchers in
That
Walmart.
was my next question. Can we what good is a Brita filter?
Well, for survival purposes, not much. It makes the water taste a little better. That's about it. When it comes to rendering suspect water drinkable or
Mhm.
potable, you want to use something like the Sawyer Mini is a great one. Grail, Grayl, has a couple of good ones. Um, those are the brands that I tend to stick with. There's a ton of others. There's Katadyn, there's Micropure, um, there's about a half dozen others whose names are escaping me. But what they do is they do the same thing that the Brita does. They just their filters are able to stop much smaller
Mhm.
things like the protozoa, the bacteria, the viruses, that kind of stuff. It's important to read the literature that goes with the filter so you have a real good understanding what it will and what it will not filter out. You might not be too worried about heavy metals where you live. Other people might be. If you live in an urban area, it's probably going to be a little bit more of a
Mhm.
concern than if you live in the middle of nowhere. Okay. Filtration removes the stuff. Purification renders the stuff moot as far as we're concerned. Okay. So, boiling, for example, boiling doesn't remove the
Mhm.
bacteria and protozoa, it just kills it. So, it doesn't hurt us anymore. Okay. But by the same token, when you're boiling water, what comes out of there?
Steam.
Steam. What is that steam?
Pure water.
Right. If you can capture it and distill it down and make it liquid again, you've got pure water. However, the other end of this is if you have, say, a half gallon of water and it has heavy metals in it and you boil it, you're concentrating the heavy metals because they're not going away.
Mm.
Okay. You're
Mhm.
actually, in that instance, you're making your situation worse rather than better. That's why it's important to have a good understanding of the threats that you may be facing where you are. So, for example, if you're collecting water out of a drainage ditch and that water is coming off of a farm field,
Mhm.
it could be loaded with pesticides and
Ugh.
fertilizer and things like that. And boiling that water isn't going to help you. It's actually going to make it a little bit worse.
So what if you Brita the water and then boil the water?
If you filter the water and then boil the
Yeah.
water and you're using a quality filter that is designed to remove those chemicals and heavy metals and whatnot, then you're golden. Okay. Um, Now, when we talk about boiling water, and boiling is kind of the go to solution for in a lot of cases. Okay. Boiling is kind of the gold standard in terms of getting rid of the biological contaminants that are going to be in that water, the protozoa, the viruses, all that. Here's the fun fact: how long do you need to boil the water?
I have no until it boils and then 5 minutes.
Okay. Brian, how long do you think you need to boil the water?
I don't know. That was actually the question I was going to ask you. So you
Okay.
tell me.
We're so in sync.
So if you go online, you'll see figures of 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I've seen 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You need to boil the water at 20 minutes at a rolling boil. Here's the science. Most biological contaminants are rendered inert at roughly 150 degrees
Okay.
at about a minute at 150 degrees, give or take. Water boils at 212 degrees at sea level. Okay. By the time the water has reached a full boil, it's probably been above 150 degrees for at least a few minutes. Okay. The CDC recommends that we boil the water for 1 minute. Even that is kind of overkill, but I'm okay with that. The reason that this is an issue or could potentially be an issue is boiling water requires fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Fuel might be in short supply. You want to conserve your fuel as much as you can. If you don't need to boil that water 20 minutes, then don't boil it for 20 minutes because that's 20 minutes worth of fuel that you're using that you could have been using for something else. Yes, sir.
So let's say I'm lost in the woods, not in my garden, but in the woods, and I've listened to the show, so I know not to keep updating my voicemail message with where I am. I don't have any sort of filtration system. I don't know the land around me, so I boil the water, hoping to kill the bacteria, etc., but also hoping there's no heavy metals or pesticides or crap in there.
Mm-hmm.
The shorter amount of time I boil it, the less likely I am to be impacted by the pesticides and heavy metals and such.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
The shorter the length of time that you're boiling the water, the less of the water that's going to be boiled away. And thus the less concentrated those chemicals are going to be. Now, as a practical matter, if you're lost in the woods, odds are heavy metals, pesticides, that kind of stuff probably isn't going to be an issue anyway because
I
you're in
know,
a
but
forest.
I'm thinking like our listeners.
I know you know that. I know
Right.
you know that. I just want to elaborate for some of the listeners for whom this is all brand new shit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I told you at the outset, Brian, a lot of this stuff is just memory. I'm just spewing out these little facts that I've
Mm-hmm.
memorized over the years.
It's impressive, dude.
Now, let's back up for a minute and let's go back to water storage for a second.
Okay.
We've got the cases of water. We've got
Mm-hmm.
the refilled 2 liter bottles, that kind of stuff. There's one other tool that you
Oh.
can invest in, that you can pick up anywhere online. Amazon's got them in other places. It's called a water BOB. Okay, basically, it's a giant plastic bag that you put into your bathtub, and
Yeah.
if something happens and hey, we might not be able to access water, you attach it to your faucet and you drain as much of your water into it as you can. Okay. Now, people have been doing this for years where, oh my God, we're going to lose water, fill up the bathtub. And that's okay. That's okay. However, I don't care how often you scrub that bathtub.
Don't drink it.
Are you really going to think that you're just going to dunk your head in and drink that water?
No.
No.
If it was the last water I had, I would treat it or do what I could to it.
Right.
Don't throw the baby out.
Exactly. This water BOB, it's a neat thing. I mean, you unfold it. It's got a little spigot on it and everything, and it's a great way to capture that water while you still have water pressure to fill it.
How long is that plastic good for? Do we know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I would say easily weeks.
As long as you can pick it up out of your bathtub.
You don't pick it up. You leave it in
exactly.
there. It's got a spigot. You're not going to be picking this thing up and moving it around.
One thing that I do, we talked, I believe it was last episode about canning,
Hmm.
about food storage and canning, and
Hmm.
how inept I am at canning and just the terror of accidentally poisoning my family because I didn't do it right. But one thing that those cans are excellent for is for storing extra water because
Yep.
there's nothing else in them. They are just empty containers.
Hmm.
And why would I not use that shelf space that's already being taken up with something
Right.
useful like drinking water?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the beauty of cases of water too, because you can store them anywhere.
Mhm.
Slip some underneath the bed, in the back of a closet, things like that. Water in and of itself, H2O, never goes bad.
Mhm.
Water doesn't spoil. It's the container that becomes an issue over time. Commercial bottled water, easily a year, easily, without any problem, provided you're not storing it in a really hot place. You keep it at room temperature or a little bit cooler, keep it out of the sunlight, and you're golden for at least a year. Now, you get some pushback from people who they're concerned about microplastics getting into the water, things like that. And I'm not going to say that the concern is not valid, but what I will say is I don't want to die of dehydration. And if I have the choice between staying hydrated and not, I'm going to stay hydrated, even if there is a risk of ingesting some small amount of microplastics that might one day make me sick 100 years down the road. Okay. For me, it's as simple as that. You want to survive today so you can worry about tomorrow.
Mhm.
Right.
Um, I've got a few points to add if that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and I've got
So,
a few questions as well. So
oh,
go
fun.
go ahead.
So Jim talked about having a gallon of water per person per day. A lot of people don't even know like how much water they should be drinking on a daily basis to stay hydrated.
Mm-hmm.
And just a rule of thumb, and it's easy to remember unless you don't stand on a scale ever. But if you go to weigh yourself, you usually just cut that number in half, and that's as many ounces as you
Okay.
should drink per day to stay well hydrated. I am not 200 pounds, but I shoot for about 100 ounces a day just to make sure that I'm not dehydrated. um, but, and then again, to Jim's point, do not store the minimum amount of water
Yeah.
for simply hydration.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
if it's like maybe you're just a buck 05 and your big dumb cup is 50 ounces and you're like, as long as I can fill this up 30 times, I have enough
Mm-hmm.
water. No, you still need to wash your behind, honey.
Yeah.
So,
And keep in mind that a lot of if despite, watching the last episode, you still went out and bought all kinds of dehydrated and freeze dried vittles, all of those require water.
mm,
You don't want to munch crunchy freeze dried food. It's just not good. You're going to want to rehydrate it, and you need water to do that.
mhm.
Now, to your hydration point, something I was told, an easy way to judge how hydrated you are is to pay attention to your output.
Oh, that
The,
too.
the, the more clear you are, the more hydrated you are. And I went through a kidney stone fiasco about a year ago, and I don't ever want to go through that again in life. And I was told part of the reason I developed it is because I was habitually dehydrated. So I make damn sure to drink a lot of water every single day.
Another point I want to add is I know a lot of people are like, if it's not cold, I cannot drink it. Um, and it is just a preference thing. I lived in the desert for 2 years of my life, and you drank the water you had. And if it was 105 degrees, 135 degrees, you drank it. And the cool thing to understand is also, if you are in a survival situation, is that warm water will metabolize in your body faster and easier, while it's cold water burns calories, because the
Yep.
calories, your body has to warm up that water in order to metabolize it. So you're actually like losing energy that way. And then further, do not try to chew ice in order to hydrate, because again, you're going to maybe not dehydrate yourself, but you're going to burn more calories just kind of converting that
Right.
to body water, than just drinking regular room temperature water.
Absolutely.
All right, I got a couple questions.
Okay.
Starting with, now let's go back to that listener you mentioned who maybe after listening to our last episode still went and bought the freeze-dried food, even though we told them not to. While they're at the Army surplus store buying that, they see the little tube of water purification tablets.
Oh, the iodine.
Are those any good? Do they work? Is it better and easier just to boil it, Jim? What's the consensus?
I like options. Okay. In fact, one of my catchphrases from back in the day when I first started writing about this stuff is the whole point of prepping is to give yourself options in an emergency. So you're not locked into one particular train of thought or course of action. When it comes to water, I want as many options as possible. So what I've done is I have water filters, I have water purification tablets, I have the ability to boil water, I have chlorine bleach that you can use to purify water. The water tablets work great. I like I think it's chlorine dioxide, rather than the iodine ones. The iodine ones, they make the water taste like ass. Okay. The other ones, it doesn't give it that bad taste. Okay. And that's particularly important if you have little kids involved. Okay. It's bad
Oh,
enough trying to get them to eat green
yes.
beans, let
Oh my
alone sticky water.
goodness. Yes.
Okay. So anything you can do to make this more appealing, the better.
I have a hard time getting my kids to drink the water like from bedtime the next day. Like they
Yeah.
just, Mom, it's yucky. Dude,
Mhm.
it's just you've been looking at it. Like
Mhm.
nothing happened to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to talk about bad water.
Okay.
What I mean by that, I often think of my grandma. And my grandma, can't remember if we've mentioned her on the show or not. She's 98. She lives by herself in the mountains of West Virginia, and she's a tough old bird. She still once a year gets out there and fires her pistol to make sure she can still do it. She still cans. But on her property, she has 2 springs and a well. And for years she's relied on the springs, and she would say, "Oh, those springs, you can go and drink from them right there in the ground." And Grandma, there's deer pooping all around your spring. I don't think you want to do that, but it never hurt her. Then one year, that unexpected hurricane, blew through West Virginia and decimated it, including both of her springs. So there are survival situations, particularly hurricanes, where there's water all around you, and it's bad water. All sorts of diseases. There's all sorts of critters in that water. In a situation like that, Jim, let's say they're far from home, they're far from their prep or pantry, they're on vacation in New Orleans, and the city's underwater. What do you do to find clean water in that situation? I would think filtration and boiling maybe not enough.
It should be enough. I mean, again, depending on the quality of your filter, and you have to know what your filter is able to do and not able to do. A generic, like, for example, let's talk about the Life Straw for a second, because that's a popular.
Thank you.
filter.
That was on my
Okay?
list.
That's
The Life
where
Straw.
I was hoping you'd go.
Okay. Now the Life Straw for those, the five of you watching this who've never seen this before, it's about, get in the camera, it's about 8 inches long, 8 to 10 inches long. It's what we call a point of use filter, where you take the straw, you dunk the working end into the water, and you suck the water through it, and the water gets filtered as it goes through the straw.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they work. I'm not going to say they don't work. But the only place where Life Straw exceeds other filters is in marketing. Okay?
Touche.
Now, I want you to think about this for a second.
Mhm.
You're thirsty. You want to drink of water, so you whip out your Life Straw and you get a drink of water. No problem. Now, let's say it's 3 hours later and you want to rehydrate one of these meals that you picked up at Walmart, Mountain House or Wise or whatever it is. The only way that Life Straw is going to give you water is you suck the water up and you spit it into that meal over and over and over and over and over until you have enough in there to rehydrate your stuff. That doesn't sound like a fun time to me. Okay.
No.
That's why, again, I go with like the Sawyer Mini, where you can use it in so many different ways. And it does the same thing a Life Straw does, just better. Okay. The Life Straw is not a bad product. I want to make that very clear. There's nothing inherently bad about it. It's just a matter of how you're going to use it.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think it's good for like hiking. Like, you
Yeah.
pack your hiking bag, you got your bear mace, you got your
Mhm.
knife, you got a
Yep.
rope, a compass, and your Life Straw.
Exactly. It works great in those type of situations. But if you're at all anticipating needing to filter more than just a mouthful at a time, you're going to want to go with something different.
I think a lot of people don't realize that MREs or meals ready to eat or those military meals, you need water to heat up the food. And a lot of people don't understand the heating mechanism either. And Jim says it over and over and over to try it before you need it.
Mm-hmm.
And that one definitely has a learning curve.
Mm-hmm. The one big advantage that MREs have over everything else is you don't need to worry about toilet paper.
That was fun. This is true. They used to have cigarettes in them too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now they have gum that just dissolves in your mouth.
Well, and somebody told me once, and I don't know how accurate this is, but I was told that the candy or gum that are in modern MREs is formulated so that it will help alleviate the constipation that comes from consuming MRE.
Oh dear.
Now,
I've heard that, but I have not tried it. I was out by the time they came out with that. Dacia, you've been in more
Yeah,
recently.
it's been about 10. I got out about 10 years ago, and I don't remember not having a problem with them. They're not a fun time. They're
No.
just very dense, and
Yeah.
they're yucky, and they're good bartering tools.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the one thing I will give the Navy. Being on ship, we ate much better than out in the field. But on occasion, if we had to go to the beach, then we had to eat the same thing everybody else was eating. So,
Mhm.
all right, guys, any more final thoughts on water?
I did have like a little bit. I want to talk about a well, and that's mostly because this is we moved out into the woods. I've lived on city water my whole life. So this is like my first stint with a well, and my biggest concern is that if I lose power, I lose water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What?
Yep.
But it's a
Yep.
well. Like,
Yep.
is the water going to stay in that tank, and I just got to get the water out the tank?
Well, your pump, you have a pump, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
The pump is
The
what
water
pushes
up
the
out of the
water
ground.
up and out.
Yep.
So it's not going to stay in the tank. Once it comes out,
No.
it's going to stay.
What
Shit.
you can do is look up a product called a flow jack.
Thank you.
FLOJAK, I believe.
Mhm.
I have not used one myself, but I have heard them recommended by others. Basically, it's a hand pump, a
Mhm.
hand operated pump to move water out of your well so that you're able to access it.
Cool.
I actually own one,
Oh,
but I
okay.
have not yet had the opportunity to try it out. So I'm
Okay.
kind of waiting for a good hurricane or, the grid to go down or something, nuclear, maybe not nuclear war, but something.
Yeah.
So I can just get out there and test this baby out.
Well, make sure you take notes so that when society has reasserted itself, we can come back and do a review.
Exactly.
It's awesome. You guys are great. This was hilarious.
The one thing I want to stress to all of our listeners / viewers, water is a critical need.
Mm-hmm.
You need it to survive. And the thing is, if you have water available to you, clean water that you can use, everything else after the disaster gets so much easier. If you don't have it, that immediately becomes your number one concern in most cases. And you can't rest until you've solved that problem. So solve it ahead of time so you don't need to worry about it.
Solve it ahead of time. Think back to the pandemic when you'd go to the supermarket and what was missing? Toilet paper and water. Couldn't find it anywhere.
Oh, I didn't realize water was missing. Also, don't wing it. Don't cross your fingers and hope for the best. There's some nasty stuff in the clearest of streams. There's leaching. Animals live, animals poop, animals die, and rotting flesh breeds disease and bacteria. Don't risk it, guys. Don't do it.
No.
Exactly. All right. Well, folks, if you enjoy the show, we appreciate that. If you could let others know that you enjoy the show, that would be wonderful. No matter where you listen, be it Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever, give us a review. 5 stars if you think we're worth it. 4 stars we'll take as well. 1 star, maybe keep that to yourself. Okay. If you are watching on YouTube, feel free to leave us a comment down below if there's something you'd like us to talk about. If you'd like to peruse previous episodes, you'd like to learn more about Dacia, Jim, or myself, probably the easiest way to do that is to go to howtosurvive2025.com. And thank you, Dacia, for setting that up.
Hey, no problem, guys.
Yeah. So, all right. Until next time, we don't have a sign off for this show yet. We should come up with some kind of sign off slogan.
No.
We'll workshop it. We can ask
It's going to be okay.
I like that.
There we go.
It's cozy.
All right. We will